Right from when you turn up at the NDA or the depot, everything is provided free for you by the government. They don't pay school fees. We train them for free. We send them on courses for free. Everything in military life is free once you enter, apart from buying your drinks at the mess. Anytime you go on training, we pay for it. And I should know because I served in the army as an instructor for 1 year. So them coming over to come and usurp, but it's led us into this, craziness which we found ourselves. We seem not to know what's left is different from right. It skewed everything. It turned one part of the country against the other. Brothers fighting against each other. It led us into civil war. And it shouldn't have occurred. Waste, years of waste. Corruption, you couldn't question them. They made sure that they killed our democratic institutions.
Frank Herbert was an American science fiction author, best known for the 1965 novel Dune and its 5 sequels. He once said, "Empires do not suffer emptiness of purpose at the time of their creation. It is when they have become established that aims are lost and replaced by vague ritual." All right, our next quote is from Chinua Achebe, Nigerian novelist, poet, and critic who is regarded as a dominant figure of modern African literature. He once said, "Nigeria is what it is because its leaders are not what they should be." Okay, that's some strong one. Our last quote is from Tara Fela Durotoye, Nigerian beauty entrepreneur and lawyer. She once said, "What we need now is a nation of great people who live to positively impact others and build enduring legacies." I like. Now let's see how all of this quote relate to what we'll be discussing today. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Now today, Nigeria as an independent sovereign national clock 62. Hooray! So on behalf of every Kaftan TV staff in Abuja, Lagos and Ondo studios, here's wishing you, our very esteemed viewers and followers in Nigeria and its diaspora, a very happy Independence Day celebration. We love, cherish and appreciate you so much. Now that said, on the conversation today, we will be looking at Nigeria at 62. 62 years of independence. What gives? But before we kickstart the conversation, let's have a better understanding of what independence means. Now, it means, according to the Oxford Dictionary, the word independence is the fact or state of being independent. Now, that being said, being independent simply means free from outside control, not subject to another's authority. That's another definition from the same Oxford Dictionary. But according to Cambridge Dictionary, being independent means not taking help, that's underlined, or money from other people, and that was underlined. Okay, now that said, are we truly independent? On October 1st, 1960, Nigeria officially declared its independence from the United Kingdom. In his speech, then Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said, and I quote, "When this day in October 1960 was chosen for our independence, it seems that we all were destined to move with quite dignity to our place on the world stage. Recent events have changed the scene beyond recognition so that we find ourselves today being tested to the utmost." Then he continued, saying that we all called upon me immediately to show that our claims to responsible government are well-founded. And having been accepted as an independent state, we must at once play an active part in maintaining the peace of the world and in preserving civilization. Then he added that I promise you, we shall not fail for want of determination. and we come to these tasks better equipped than many. Now, saying that in the 62 years since Nigeria have created a huge impact on the world, grown to become Africa's largest economy, and today it is the most populous black nation on earth. But that doesn't actually mean that we've not had our own challenges or brawls. Nigeria have had several coups, civil war, ethnic clashes, and the country is still dealing with corruption and over 10-year battle with terrorist organization Boko Haram and ISWAP. One thing that has survived all of these glitches is the fact and the resilience of the Nigerian people. Over the country's 62 years history, its people have constantly demonstrated strength and the will to surmount the most daunting challenges, and that is worth celebrating. That said, my guest on the show today is Kola Alapinni, international human rights lawyer. He will be sharing his thought on the Nigerian state and then the Nigeria independence at 62. We will get right to that conversation. Welcome again to The Conversation. Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you're right on time for the interview. Our guest on the show this morning is Kola Alapinni. He is an international human rights lawyer. It's good to have you on the show again.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
All right, now let's talk about Nigeria at 62. Despite all, what exactly are you grateful for? Looking back at 62 years of independence.
We were speaking earlier, weren't we? Before the recording, and I said I'm just grateful to be alive. You know, in Nigeria, when you go to bed and you make it to the next day, it's a huge feat because you just don't know what's going to happen to you, the next time. You know, grateful to be alive. When you look at the spate of insecurity, the insecurity challenges we've been having, we can't even go to Kaduna, which is just 2 hours away by road or train. That's scary. We never knew we would end up in this situation, especially having elected a former general who wept on TV, who applied for the job, who said it would put us in a better situation security-wise.
Now, some people have actually said, are we supposed to be celebrating or commemorating for you? What is it?
Is there a difference? Celebrating independence or commemorating it? It's some sort of remembrance, isn't it?
So should there be the pomp and pageantry, like you've already seen the programs that have been reeled out for the Independence Day celebration?
I think this government has a fundamental problem in being frugal. I don't think we have those resources to be spending. I think it could have been channeled into something else. If our president falls ill, he always runs to the UK. I would have expected that someone who battled, illness for so long, will pack the presidential jet in the United Kingdom for six months. They had to waive some of the charges for us because it became abominable for someone who had, been challenged in that area. I would have thought he would have taken healthcare system very seriously. So we don't have money to pay ASU, but we can fund a jamboree. Now you understand the reason why ASU is angry. Because it shows that we have misplaced priorities. So that's it. This government is, it doesn't mean what it say. But
then it's not like it's only this government that has been partying every October 1st.
But this government campaigned,
previous ones.
This government campaigned on frugality. That's deception. You told people, so why did we chase Jonathan out? We chased Jonathan out because they said it was wasteful and this and that, and the incumbent campaigned on frugality, how they were going to slash and plug the holes and this, and we have a treasury single account, and this left us more disillusioned. It seemed as if there's even more corruption or more wasteful spending under this government than it was under Goodluck Jonathan. At least Goodluck Jonathan had a more national look to his government. More people felt that they belonged more than now that it seems as if this government is skewed towards a certain part of the country.
Are you part of the people that they say when you actually divorce a first wife and then you get a second wife, then you know the importance of the first wife? Because we all heard the hue and cry when you had former President Goodluck Jonathan, and then everybody had this, he was corrupt, he had this and all of that, but then you just start hearing, oh, okay, I think we did it better. For some people, that's what they say. Are you among that crowd?
It's human nature to always want to compare. If you had a good deal or a bad deal. I must say that Goodluck Jonathan himself, President Goodluck Jonathan, didn't make it easy. Because how can they make you commander-in-chief? It was like a man, a young boy who was drowned wearing his father's agbada. It just seemed to be swamped with Nigeria's problem. He wasn't taking decisive action. He wasn't taking decisive action against some of the members of his cabinet who were accused of corruption. He seemed to condone it. Did you read the reports, the cable during the WikiLeaks era, the various cables of the U.S. government, the U.S. embassy sent, about him? He didn't make it easy. And that was why the mantra of change connected with a lot of people. They just wanted him out. It was in the twilight days, just weeks before the elections. You remember we postponed the elections, and then they got in, mercenaries from South Africa to help with the fight with Boko Haram, and that was when it seemed as if the tide was changing. But it was too late. And if you read the books, Lost on a Platter of Gold by Bolaji Abdullahi, a former minister, we catalogued all these events there. And the various mistakes made by the Jonathan administration that made people believe a former general who was booted out of power by his colleagues in 1985, who had run for the presidency 3 times and lost woefully. He was a regional champion. He had a cult following in northern Nigeria, but that was it. He couldn't, have a handshake across the Niger. He couldn't penetrate into the east. He couldn't penetrate into the west. He was stuck in the north, and that was it. Until an alliance was formed and they marketed him as a reformed military per se, and he's now a reformed Democrat. That was the only reason why he got in. Jonathan lost the election. He literally dashed the presidency to General Babangida. If anybody had run against Jonathan and it was under the APC, anybody could have won. It didn't have to be General Buhari alone. It was that bad. So it was his own to lose. Jonathan lost. He dashed away the presidency because he didn't address things he was supposed to do. How you want to remove subsidy? People have gone home for Christmas, and on the first day of the year, you just remove it and leave people stranded. There was a catalog of errors, and people got tired. And we had expected that a man who had campaigned so much, he was going to do these and fix this, and then coming with just hearing excuses, and they're still talking about excuses dating back to the PDP years. PDP was in power for 16 years. Oh, they did this. We know. That's why you were elected. Fix it. And complain for over 7 years now. It's going to leave very soon, in a couple of months. And it will be interesting to hear what history will say about his own administration as well.
All right. Now, there's been this argument over time on when exactly Nigeria gained her independence. Some say that it is 1960, while others say it is 1963. Because even when the colonial masters said that they have granted Africa's most populous nation her independence, the Queen was still the head of state at the time. And then Nnamdi Azikiwe, who we hail as Nigeria's first indigenous governor general, still had to report matters with regards to state of the nation to the Queen until 1963, when Nigeria evolved into a republic. So let's help Help us respond to such argument for people who make such
It's very
argument.
simple. Nigeria became independent in 1960. And you can also see that was when I think that was when we joined the United Nations, so shortly thereafter. 63 was just the year we decided that the Queen was no longer going to be head of state. Because Nnamdi Azikiwe's role was Governor General, ceremonial was representing the Queen, so to speak. And the Queen was effectively the head of state. Nigeria is still a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, which is an association of former colonies of the United Kingdom. So what just happened was we decided in 1963 that we were going to go we're going to become a republic, and we were not going to have the Queen as our head of state anymore. We asserted our nationhood. That's all. It's very clear that we became independent in 1960. That's what history told us. That's what all the biofacts of Nigeria. If you look at the year of independence in 1960, there's no confusion there. Maybe people interpret not having the Queen as head of state as real independence. It's a matter of how you see it.
Okay. We also read that Nigeria's Supreme Court was not independent, as it was initially subject to the appellate jurisdiction of the United Kingdom Judicial Council of the Committee of the Privy Council, meaning that persons who were not satisfied with the court rulings, they still have to take their appeal to the United Kingdom, and it remained so until 1963, when Nigeria eventually became a republic and then was handed over the Republican constitution. And then the Supreme Court, as we know now, was then made the final or the apex court in Nigeria's legal system. So in 1963 was when when the country became free from all of the links that they had with the British government, and then became an independent sovereign nation. And that's what a lot of people are arguing. Now, I'd like to get your thoughts on that argument. That's one on the side. And then secondly, how would you rate Nigeria's judicial system if we keep hearing that the Nigerian judiciary is the hope of the common man? Since then till now, how would you rate how the judicial system since then until now?
It was only logical that our cases go to the Privy Council in the United Kingdom if the Queen was still the head of state. In any case, it was, that was the system. We still exist in the Caribbean, where most of the countries there, if they're not satisfied after they've exhausted all the domestic remedies, they can approach the Privy Council. That was normal. Because we were not a republic, and when we became a republic, then we cut off all those links and decided we were not going to the judiciary in the UK as the final destination anymore. So that was logical. There was no way we could say the Queen is not our head of state anymore, and then we'll still be going to the Privy Council in the UK. We had to set up our own. And at that point in time, we had, a crop of fine judges who we knew could lead the Supreme Court. I must remind you that quite a number of them were called to the English bar and, did their training in the UK. So the quality of mind was not in doubt. And that's we had capable hands who could decide these cases for us. And now cases decided abroad are just persuasive. It's just to show the judge how your brother judges are thinking internationally or abroad, because we have enough cases in Nigeria decided in all areas to guide us. Regarding how the judiciary has fared, well, I would say largely well, because you have to, historically, Nigerian judiciary has always been we've always paraded one of the finest crop of judges in Africa. We've always supplied judges to other countries. In the Gambia, for instance, we've always supplied judges to them. One of my tutors, when I was in the law school, was a former DPP, Director of Public Prosecution in the Gambia. Up to today, we still have judges in the Gambia. The former Chief Justice of Gambia was Nigerian at some point in time, in Botswana as well. in Uganda as well. And even up to today, we still train law students from Anglophone Cameroon in Nigeria, in Gambia too. They come to law school here. So that has never been in doubt. What gives us issue is when you have bizarre judgments coming out of our courts and
conflicting judgments.
Conflicting orders and this, and I know the NGC is looking into it. They are the body who have the powers to discipline judges. But the concerns are real that you've raised, and if you look at the situation where we had with the last Chief Justice of Nigeria, who was hounded out of office by his colleagues, so it appears. Were disgruntled with the way he was running the Supreme Court. And then the CJ had to quickly tender his letter of resignation because he had lost the confidence of the court. Though he said it was to attend to his health. But we all saw the memo that there was a rebellion at the Supreme Court. And there was no way he was going to survive it. And then it took the wisest decision, the honorable decision. When people resign in Nigeria, you must know something is wrong. We are not the people who are designed to resign. It can happen in the UK. I mean, Boris Johnson resigned. It's not a problem. David Cameron resigned.
But I think recently you have a particular commissioner in Lagos that resigned with regards to the building collapse that you had there.
And the Attorney General in Ogun State, a colleague, also resigned just like that. And these are very rare situations in our country. We're not that selfless.
Now, since we're talking about leadership, especially in the judicial system, let's talk about that of the Nigerian Bar Association. Now, quite a lot of people have said that since the days of Alao Akabashoro, that you've not had people that had that kind of charisma or quality, had that kind of the finest. Nigeria has not had that kind of finest leadership at the bar. Would you agree?
Well, Alao Akabashoro is a tough act to follow, okay, and there were various reasons for that. He was an NBA president during the military rule of General Babangida, and the Babangida regime was notorious for breaching human rights, and anybody who opposed the thoughts of the government was hauled into jail. And several times Chief Ganifawa, late Chief Ganifawa was detained by the Babangida regime, like Taisho Laring, and a host of them. So the NBA was the voice of the people. They challenged the military in all ways that they could through the rule of law. It was a very powerful, it is still a very powerful pressure group. Whatever the NBA says is taken very seriously. The elections are probably the most monitored and most interest-generating elections by a professional body. Everybody wants, it's all on the front pages of newspapers. I don't see any other professional association like that in Nigeria. You have their elections, splashed all over the front pages. And if you look back in history, the military made sure that we didn't have a strong presidency, NBA presidency like Alao Akabashoro, because they compromised the NBA in 1992. The NBA could not elect a president in Port Harcourt. And we went into comatose at the national level. The state chairmen were there. We functioned at the state level where it was intact. But we had no arrowhead nationally who could speak with a national voice. It was a deliberate attempt by the military to decapitate the NBA. It's because, Ibadan branch, Lagos branch, the Ikeja branch, all had chairmans, and if they were speaking, they could not speak in a unified voice for the bar. It's the NBA president. He's the number one lawyer in Nigeria. That's the president of the NBA. The Attorney General of the Federation might have precedence in court, being the chief law officer of the Federation. But when you're talking about lawyers and private practice, the NBA president is, is the number one lawyer.
All right.
So that but we've had, for instance, Olumide Akpata, who's just recently finished. It was very, robust, gave us our voice back in the NBA. Yes, very popular with young wigs. It won a resounding victory based on his relationship with young lawyers, and who were more tech savvy. They were the ones who elected him in. So he made sure that the old guard were trying to muzzle him or muffle his voice, and the young Turks would not agree. Right. So for the first time in almost 20 years, we had someone who was not an SAN lead the Nigerian bar. Alawa Kabashoro was not an SAN. It wasn't always like that we had an SAN leading the Nigerian bar. It was a conspiracy against everyone that led to emergence of NBA presidents being senior advocates of Nigeria, especially when they were using the delegate system. How come, an association as vibrant and knowledgeable, if we say we're learned, why do I need somebody to vote on my behalf as a delegate? Why not one man, one vote? And that was what happened when the past president, Austin Alege, democratized it and made sure everybody had one vote. Then we've started seeing this revolution in the NBA.
All right, we're actually due for a break, but before we go on that break, because you talked about the military, now, we cannot celebrate Nigeria's democracy at 62 without also celebrating 29 years of uninterrupted democratic rule. In the 6 decades Nigeria has gone through the independent route, we've had the military and then the democratic rule. So if we have to make comparison or any kind of comparative analysis of the 4 decades of military rule and then the 2 decades of democratic rule, would you actually say that we've made enough progress, or we're still work in progress as against what we had in the earlier 4 years, or 4 decades rather, of moving from dictatorial to democratic rule?
You want me to answer that, or to
I'd like you to take that before we go on that break.
Okay, you just said it yourself, 4 decades of military rule. 20 of democracy. Actually, in those 4 decades, I think 29 of them were military years, not all the 4 decades. The military were in power for 29 years. We had civilian rule from, say, 1960 to 1966, and then in 1979 to 1983. And apart from that, all the other years seem to be of military years. The incursion of the military into political space in Nigeria is the most unfortunate thing that happened to our public life. It shouldn't have happened. The military has no place in governance. That's not what they're trained for. They're trained to protect our country, its territorial integrity, from external aggression. End of story. And I was making an example earlier, and I said, in your establishment here, no matter how badly run your chief executive officer runs it, or the chief operating officer, or how bad the producers can be, your guard cannot come and usurp power. It's not his place. And that is just what the military was supposed to do. They are guardsmen. We buy their weapons. We put the uniform on their back. It's a charter. They signed with us. I will lay down my life for my country. And, my country does this for me. Right from when you turn up at the NDA or the depot, everything is provided free for you by the government. They don't pay school fees. We train them for free. We send them on courses for free. Everything in military life is free once you enter, apart from buying your drinks at the mess. Anytime you go on training, we pay for it. And I should know, because I served in the army as an instructor for 1 year. So them coming over to come and, usurp, but it's led us into this, craziness, which we found ourselves. We don't even, we seem not to know what left is different from right. You know, it skewed everything. It turned one part of the country against the other, brothers fighting against each other. It led us into civil war. And it shouldn't have occurred. Waste, years of waste, corruption, you know, you couldn't question them. They made sure that they killed our democratic institutions, they killed our universities. The NDA, as I was telling you, and the various military colleges in Nigeria, all the officers who go there to serve, they eat there for free. The NDA, you go to school for free in the NDA. They don't pay university fees. We pay. Have you ever heard the NDA striking before? They can't strike. We pay for university. Government made us start paying for university. We started paying for our meals. The quality of education has gone down. ASU is still on strike.
All right. You've actually touched on some nerves, so we'll definitely get right. We'll start from where you landed when we come back from this break. So let's go on this quick break, and when we return, we'll continue with this conversation. See you shortly. You've talked about quite a lot of activists. You've mentioned names like Gani Fawehimi, and then we had the likes of Olu Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, we had the likes of Fela Kuti, we had the Kensaro Wiwas, and then who were always at the forefront to press home their demands. Will you actually say that what we have now is the true activism to put an end to all forms of human rights violations? Are we actually crossing the T's and dotting the I's?
Sadly, no. Nigerian police initially, you have to look at their origin. It wasn't set up for Nigeria. It wasn't set up for Nigerians. It was a colonial force. It was a force set up by the British to deal with us. And years after, the Nigerian police has not evolved. It still sees itself as a tool of the government. Because that was what it was meant for. It was to crush, misbehaving members of the of the colony. It wasn't set up with empathy for we the people. It was a colonial force. It could bear its fangs with brute force and quell rebellion. End of story.
If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you've missed out on a lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. Our guest on the show today is Kola Alapinni. He is an international human rights lawyer, and we have been talking about quite a lot of things, but then let's talk about where you landed. You talked about those calling for one thing or the other. Now, someone actually stated that the problem of Nigeria started from the amalgamation of the northern and the southern protectorates, where they had forcefully bind people together. Since then up until now, with the three largest ethnic group, they're still struggling to live in harmony because they always have had their fundamental differences in values, worldviews, that's beyond the obvious language, clothing, and marital distinctions. So, according to them, they say the fault is from our foundation. But then you have the governor of Lagos State, who stated, he said, and quote, "We must utilize the great strength that we have in our diversity and the unique resilience that is second nature to us to achieve the Nigeria of our dream." Now, how do we utilize our strength and our diversity when a lot of people are calling for different things from the east, the west, the north, and the south? People calling for different things. I'm going to ask you two questions and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. That's one on the side. And then secondly, what are your thoughts on those who are calling for restructuring and those who are campaigning under the aegis of restructuring, saying that they're going to restructure the country? Do they have a cogent reason for making that call? And is restructuring the best answer to this puzzle?
Okay, lest I forget, remind me the question on restructuring. It's something that's very passionate to my mind. But let me take you to the first arm of your question. The governor has spoken well. That's an idealistic statement. That's where we would love to be ideally, right? Where we have so many differences, but we can make our differences work. Yes, unity. There should be unity in diversity. And, we have a stronger gene pool because we're so different. Okay. And if we're tolerant of ideas and these and that, take a little from the north, from the west, from the east, and mix everything together, we're supposed to be stronger. But that's not the reality. And the reason why that's not the reality is because Nigeria did not grow organically. Nigeria, that was this geographical entity known as Nigeria, used to belong to a company called the Royal Niger Company. Then the British came and they bought them off with almost £1 million, 900 and something thousand pounds, and then fused everybody together. It was not organic. We didn't come together by ourselves. Okay, maybe a few people had come together due to marriage, due to trade. Okay, but we did not evolve into nationhood by ourselves. It was forced. It was not organic. And I'll give you two very clear examples. The United States of America fought a revolutionary war against the British colonizers because of taxation. The British kept on increasing taxes, and the colonial settlements in America did not have a voice in the parliament. So they demanded for representation and said, no taxation without representation. And then the king, then, I think it was King George, sent an army to go and teach them a lesson. And the American people had to come together. They are, including the Red Indians, now known as Native Americans. Some fought on the side of the British, some fought on the side of Americans, some had a pact. Even the French were involved in the American War of Revolution. The Canadians, what became Canada, because France also had a stake in Canada. All these states that are ceded to the treaty, to the Declaration of Independence, to signing up to become nation states in America, it was organic. They grew into it. It was compulsion. It was a battle for survival for themselves. They knew they had to come together to defeat this great naval power known as England. So it was voluntary. They wanted it. And therein was the right to bear arms that you see in America. It became a constitutional right. The whole idea of everybody bearing arms in America is to raise, if you go and read the Second Amendment or so, is to have an ever-ready militia to defend their country in case anything like that happens again. So when you're hearing people calling for arms to be banned in America, when I went to the American Museum of Revolution, and you see all the things as they were preserved and the stories and the war tents of General George Washington and everything, I said, America is never going to get rid of arms. If this is what their eyes saw, and they wrote it into their constitution deliberately. So that's one end of it. And then we have a Nigeria that was fused together. First, it was a company that owned this geographical space. So, and this company employed people like Lord Lugard as enforcers initially, okay, to access the trade routes. That's how they removed Nana Olomo. That's why they removed the Vermin Ogbaisi. That's why they removed, all those kings in what we now know as Niger Delta. If they cannot access the trade routes, you were removed. Okay. Then eventually, the British took over, forcing everybody together. Different languages, different religion, different views. They just fused us. Amalgamate. It was not in our interest. It was for trade. Northern and Southern Protectorate ordinarily might not have even, those were like two different countries, Northern Nigeria and Southern Nigeria, who were very different, even up till today, with all the years of being fused together and intermarrying, and this, we're still essentially, Nigeria could be said to be two countries, the North and the South.
All right.
Okay. So we didn't grow organically. We were not allowed to grow organically. We were not allowed to come together because we loved ourselves and we wanted to fight for survival. And even the civil war which we fought to keep Nigeria together, we fought forcefully to hold on to ourselves. We didn't. It wasn't as if we were fighting an external aggressor to remain one, and that is a big, major problem. We've had the chance to resolve this question, and the last one being in 2014 with the Constitutional Conference, where everybody came together and put up their submissions and everything, and then the incumbent comes in and says,
that's you going into my second question, I guess.
That's part of it, restructuring, and the incumbent says, oh, I'm not going to look at it. And he is wiser than everybody else. Everybody else that was at the Constitutional Conference and came up with this document. The incumbent president is smarter than everyone and he just discards it. And that's the unfortunate place which we have found ourselves in Nigeria. The intolerance, not listening to the other side, not hearing voices. The Kanos and the Sunday Igbohos and the Ansari Dokubo and their voices would not have been heard if there was not injustice. And when the incumbents came in, the later Damas and Nkano, Alhaji Maitama Sule, this is one of the things. He said, what you need to do is do justice to everyone, to everybody. If you do justice to everybody, all this noise and everything would go away, will calm down. But he has proved to be even more nepotistic. That's the unfortunate thing. He has proved to be more nepotistic. He doesn't agree with the rule of law and order. He removed the former Chief Justice of this country through an ex parte order when the matter was still on in court, when the Senate had not decided upon it. So you can mention a whole lot of atrocities. Breaking into the House of Judges in the middle of the night, trying to cower them into submission. Under this government, raids to Judges' House has now become normalized. The other day we heard that the EFCC broke into the house of the president of the Court of Appeal in Kano. And I had to ask, I said, is it because the president of the Court of Appeal gave a dissenting judgment against the government in one of the cases which he handled regarding religious freedom? You don't do that. It's absurd. Right. And we keep making ourselves laughing stock around the world. The judiciary is the third arm of government. There's executive, there's legislature, and there's judiciary. But the most feared of them all is the judiciary, because the judiciary can sack both of them with a court ruling.
So now, in just a few words, before we go to our next question, our time is fast spent. Do you agree with those calling for restructuring? Do they have a cogent reason for making that call?
There's no way we can survive if we don't restructure. Number one, we can't keep spending money the way we are spending when we're not earning money.
All right.
The price of oil is yo-yo-ish. We cannot plan with it. The world is moving towards green energy. So the profligacy, which we are synonymous with, cannot be sustained. The members of the National Assembly cannot be earning more than the US president. You cannot cope. You cannot be going to the international world, cup in hand, and asking them for debt reduction. They just forgave some during the Obasanjo regime, and we were in a healthier position. And they've seen the excess, the amount of money which we've been wasting. And then you go to them, asking them for money. They're not going to listen to you. The UN General Assembly, I was at the UNGA a week before the General Assembly itself. We had gone to lobby some of the permanent missions on, abolishing blasphemy and apostasy laws just a week before the UNGA itself, because most of the leaders had gone to London for the burial of the Queen. And all the hotels around there are completely booked. $800. You will have to go as far as maybe Times Square to get a room for like $600. And the Nigerian contingent takes 100 people to New York, and we want them to forgive our debt. Even the presidents of some of the countries in Europe, they would stay across in Queens and all of that borough, but we would want to stay right in the middle of New York. And we can't afford it. What are we doing with 100 people going to the delegates?
All right, so now...
So if you don't mind me, there's no way we can survive without restructuring. There's no way major appointments in Nigeria can be skewed towards a certain part of the country and everybody else will not be disgruntled. There's no way. You cannot be mom to 4 children or 5 children and you keep on favoring one child above the rest. There's going to be rebellion in your home. The other kids are not going to listen to you. And God save you if those other kids are more successful than the one you favored in future, and you now have to depend on them. They're going to remind you and put you in your place. That when you had money and you're doing stuff, you only favored one person. So go to him now, or go to her now.
All right. Now let's talk about human rights and the Nigerian police. I know that they are like 2 different sectors right now, but then let's trying to connect it with the recent EndSARS protest and the demands that they made before it got infiltrated. Now, also judging from what we've seen, you've talked about quite a lot of activists. You've mentioned names like Gani Fawehimi, and then we had the likes of Olu Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, we had the likes of Fela Kuti, we had the Kensaro Wiwas, and then who were always at the forefront to press home their demands. Will you actually say that what we have now is the true activism to put an end to all forms of human rights violations? Are we actually crossing the T's and dotting the I's?
Sadly, no. And, there's no hard and fast rule or a general template of how human rights activism or challenges can be conducted. It's not one size of the heart that fits all. It's not one size fits all. You have to respond to each incident and their various
peculiarities.
Yes. You talked about EndSARS. EndSARS was actually meant for the police. People were agitating against the way Nigerian police were being treated. That was the origin of EndSARS before it snowballed into something else. They were saying the police should be reformed. They should be better trained. And we did discuss this severally on your program. I must commend you for devoting enough attention to the EndSARS issue when it occurred. People were asking for police reform. They were saying that the way our Nigerian police were being trained made them unfriendly. And remember, I told you, I said Nigerian police initially, you have to look at their origin. It wasn't set up for Nigeria. It wasn't set up for Nigerians. It was a colonial force. It was a force set up by the British to deal with us. And years after, the Nigerian police has not evolved. It still sees itself as a tool of the government, because that was what it was meant for. It was to crush, misbehaving members of the of the colony. It wasn't set up with empathy for we the people. It was a colonial force. It could bear its fangs with brute force and quell rebellion. End of story. It was to make sure that the colonial government was secure and in power. So there's no way that we can move forward and get the kind of police we want if we do not restructure it and reform it. And we lost a golden chance with the EndSARS because it became something else. And even it also revealed a fundamental flaw in our governments and the people who were elected to run. These little kids who are tech savvy mobilized themselves and ran rings around the government. The government was responding in an analog way to a digital revolution. Eventually, it had to resort to brute force and bring out the army to quell that rebellion. It would have been easier if, since EndSARS, what has changed? Police force still, we still have incidents of policemen trying to seize people's phones and check. That is the most violent and ultimate intrusion into your privacy. For a policeman to say, he doesn't have a warrant to arrest you. He doesn't have a warrant to seize the phone. The phone has not been identified as a proceed of crime or something. And
or even a search warrant.
It doesn't have any. It's just stop and search by the roadside, and it wants to, even when the Inspector General of Police has given a directive. You remember the policeman who was sacked recently? I near the Osborne. It was from Osborne Police Station, wasn't it? Thereabouts. That's what you get. The foot soldiers, the policemen, are so disconnected from the police officer cadre. They just do whatever they want to do at the checkpoints in Abuja, being erased. They go to the mosque at night, 8 p.m. They're stamping their foot on the ground, trying to get 100 naira or 200 naira from you. The men of the police force still are here, buy their uniforms by themselves, buy their shoes. And then they see, the elitist officer cadre sending their kids to school abroad and everything. And therein lies a whole gulf of, disgruntlement.
All right, now let's talk about politics in Nigeria before we round up. Since 1990, we've seen, 1990, we've actually... 1999 rather, we've actually seen several eras and dispensations come and gone, and you just begin to wonder, with this grow, if we're actually growing or declining. But then we've seen we've seen some people who have said that in 2023 that a lot of people would give the youth rather would give a lot of politicians a run for their money or their brags. So because as it stands, it looks as if the more you look, the less you see with the coming 2023 election. Now, so do you see 2023 election as that litmus test for the nation that will leave a lot of jaws dropped for a very long time? And like they say, some people say it will not be business as usual. Is that what you see?
Well, you have to realize that the youths are the higher percentage of demography in Nigeria. That's number one. These guys have the world in their palms. They have the whole world in their hands through the use of new technologies, Twitter, WhatsApp messages, Signal, wherever, Facebook, for instance, is still widely popular in Nigeria. And these are the tools that would change the future.
Even though they still call them the social media electorates.
If the government wants to test if these kids have power with their social media, why didn't they allow electronic voting? It's because they know that none of them will come back. It's just, if we can vote, and I keep saying it, it's deliberate. If we can vote for Big Brother, Project Fame, Nigerian Idol, everything with our phones, there's no reason why we cannot vote. Phones are biometric these days. It locks you. So we do bank transactions, which was more secure or what's more important than where you keep your money. And we do our transactions with all the various banks on the phone these days. Yes, I'm not saying that it is foolproof, but we can work on it. The Nigerian Bar Association has been doing its elections through phone technology in the last three election cycles or so. Yes, they will have one or two people who will be disgruntled, but by and large, we know that this is really the voice of the bar. There's no hanky-panky there. The people who get disgruntled end up being served breakfast, to use the new parlance now, because they have a bloated ego of themselves and they thought they were popular, and the young lawyers cut them to size. So if we truly want a change, we will allow electronic voting, just as we're going to have electronic transmission of results now. Okay, these are the things that will revolutionize the voting and the political sphere. A particular candidate who they have been referring to as not having a structure and this and that, can you see how people have galvanized with the use of new technology, mobile phones, Twitter, and this, and grouping and calling themselves together? So isn't it obvious to you, and even to these people who think the youths are just social media or whatever, that social media is the way forward? The former American president, he almost caused an insurrection. In fact, it caused an insurrection with the use of social media, with Twitter. He didn't step out of the White House. He was giving directives on Twitter and telling people to storm the Congress. That's how powerful social media is. Social media started the Orange Revolution in the Arab Spring. It toppled government. So that was why the government of Nigeria couldn't respond effectively, and then we ended up banning Twitter because it deleted the tweet of the president or whatever. It was just payback for the role they felt Twitter played in NSAS. So technology is the way forward, and it's going to change a lot of stuff, whether we like it or not.
All right, now let's talk about corruption. Most people will argue that even the British that colonized us, they have a fair share or level of corruption. And I hear you talk about where you stated that at least they had, you talked about the expenses and then the tickets and the receipts, and then how they were able to manage it. So now if we have to talk about in our own side, have we actually learned very well with regards to how much we can curb all of this, with having to know that this advanced nation, they had their own, they've been able to deal with their own problems to a large extent because they emphasize on building great institutions more than building great men. Now, looking at how much corruption has eaten deep into every fabric of our society, some from the days of the monkeys and the snakes and the termites eating up monies with so much relish. With all of this, do you have hope for Nigeria in terms of fighting corruption headlong, when even though we have various governments that they've come and gone and then they stated that they will definitely fight corruption, but they have their own peculiarities. But like they say, when there's a new devil, there's a new level, then there will be a new devil.
Well, I was still living in the UK when the expenses scandal occurred. And basically what happened in Parliament in the UK was that members of Parliament were fiddling with the expenses. You had to submit your receipts for expenses which you've done, or if you were not a London resident, just like you have legislators who are not all Abuja residents. So someone comes from Ibadan, for instance, you know that he doesn't have a house in Abuja. He's expected to get a house here, and government's supposed to pay for it. So you also had people, London being a cosmopolitan place, and they had homes in London, but they were the constituencies which they were representing were not London based. Some could be Norfolk, it could be Essex or wherever, and they'll flip it and say, oh, their primary residence is London, not the other place, so that they can get more money. It was a huge mess, and it was very interesting to see, people who like to call third world countries or African countries corrupt, to know that, oh, okay, so you actually dip your hands into the tea as well. So, but the response was swift. Their hands were caught in the cookie jar, and they started refunding the money and issuing statements, oh, we're sorry, this and that. Some say it was a honest mistake, and some who still kept on lying or went to jail for it. The system reformed itself. No excuses. You can't come out and be trying to defend it and say, oh, well, that was money that was entitled or that was paid to me, like some of our legislators would do over here, and be claiming entitlement for official car or this and that. No.
So for Nigeria, do you see any hope, any way of hope?
Nigeria is not
fighting corruption.
Number one, we need hope at all times. That is what would always, keep us alive. Or when there's life, there is hope. We've never had problems with our laws. Implementation of the law has always been the problem.
All right. The
laws are there. When the president wanted to invoke the Code of Conduct Tribunal against the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, he did. He did, and he even, got an ex parte order to remove when the matter was still in court, or without recourse to Parliament, because you cannot remove the Chief Justice of Nigeria without, input from the Parliament, because they were the people who also approved him.
All right. Our time is fast spent. Thank you so much for your time with us, Kola Alapinni. It's always a pleasure having this talk.
I wish we had more time. It's a pleasure.
There's never enough time to have these discussions. Thank you so much once again.
It's a pleasure.
All right, viewers, that's all we can take on the conversation today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have been talking to Kola Alapinni. He's an international human rights lawyer. It's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and have yourselves a very wonderful Independence Day celebration. Whatever you do, Stay safe. Till I come your way again from the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless Nigeria.